to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order, and we'll take the roll. Kevin.
Here.
Steve.
Here.
Trace is not here. Sandy.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
We don't have Paul. Cody.
Here.
Zach.
Here.
Bonnie, and I am here. That gives us 7, so we're good. All right, let's do it.
All right. So we have, as I said, Frank and John here from the Water and Sewer Department. And if we could go over their budgets, you already reviewed them earlier. And I'll share my screen. The only difference is the Public Works portion. Public Works Director was taken out of the budget.
Okay.
And Frank and John can answer any questions. First is water. Want to give any highlights?
It's basically the same that I had gone over at the last meeting. We took out those line items directly related to the DPW director, salary and expenses. And we did get an updated interfund transfer number this week from Town Hall. So that's what we're looking at. Pretty marginal increases, line items across the board. I can answer any specific questions you guys have.
Can you remind us what the interfund operating number that you had as a placeholder was?
Previously.
Before it actually went down, I believe I had it that I believe it was about maybe, I think before this, I think we had it as maybe 580,000.
Okay.
It was a marginal decrease.
Okay.
And in case everyone doesn't know, the interfund transfers, that's based on, so direct cost for health insurance, for the benefits like that. And then any other services, treasurer, town accountant, myself, it's a percentage based on what their budget is as a percent of the total town budget.
Okay.
Right, and the number we were looking at as far as increases for the, I mean, our actual for our charges and expenditures actually is predicted to be down from last year. Our salaries are up a little bit because of collective bargaining, and our debt and interest on long-term debt went up, but that's not something we negotiate on, really. So
Any questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Bill.
Mike, is the removal of the DPW head, which seemed to have gotten a lot of attention a week or two ago at that joint meeting. I mean, besides saying there's no money in the budget, do we need to say other things to keep the naysayers at bay? I guess the main thing is, obviously, because there's no money in the budget, and you know, the second thing is to say, well, we are pursuing it for the future. We're not going to just ignore it forever, but it's something we'll have to plan on for the future. But I can just see someone, having been to enough town meetings and whatnot, saying, well, you didn't do it this year, and then you're going to use the same excuse next year and the year after. And I'm just thinking it's might get a lot of attention. Okay.
Mike, I know at a previous meeting, you're saying that you weren't quite sure if there was going to be a lot of efficiencies gained with that position. Have we done any kind of study or figuring on that to kind of come up with a possible number?
No, you know, where we would still have the highway department, we still have a water and sewer department. I mean, we're all, you're not gonna be able to get rid of employees because they all have to still do the work. The only benefit, as we said, would be you'd have one person coordinating, in certain situations. I know John had talked, the last meeting about certain areas where they could share, equipment like they do now, when they're working on certain projects. And the only other benefit is if you spend the money and get an engineer, I mean, it's someone that's not gonna design anything, but they would have knowledge of, engineering and make sure that, the things that we get from the engineering companies we hire are, you know, up to par. But we will have to look at it and where someone will be located and, what the benefits and costs are for next year.
Because I could, to Bill's point, I could definitely see someone asking us, like,
Yeah.
you know, what would be the savings and would that offset the salary?
Mr. Chair.
Cody?
Mike, I think one of the things that I would ask before we move forward with hiring that position is, has there even been a job description created for that post?
No, we have to do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't have a definition of what the role will actually be, so setting aside money for a job that hasn't been
Mhm. Yeah.
identified yet is that's a pretty easy response is, you know, A, we don't have the money, B, we haven't even identified and laid out what the actual role and responsibilities would be.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach?
a couple questions. Mike, when was that position approved at town meeting? Was it last year or the year before?
I think it was in the fall last year.
Oh, so
I
it
think
hasn't even
springtime
been,
meeting. I think it was springtime meeting.
Springtime
it's
meeting.
been a year. And secondly, what was the intended, breakup of, the compensation for that position be? Was it 70 water, 70-30? What was the intentional plan? I know you had put it out there at some point, I just
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact numbers. It was directly related, if I'm remembering correctly, to the budgets of each department.
Right.
What I'm trying to get to is,
It was no more than, I think, no more than 25% attributed to highway. I think the bulk of it was water and sewer.
so I understand the budget is, we obviously all understand the budget situation at this time, but so basically the actual town budget, not the enterprise account, would have been affected about 25%. I'm just curious what that, you don't have to give it to me now, but what that number is.
I'll get that to you.
Thanks.
And, Mr. Chairman, this is Article 4, by the way.
Any other discussion? Okay, then the chair would entertain a motion. Someone? Anyone?
Mr. Chair,
Bill?
you usually do this, so it's,
I can't tonight, Bill.
So let's see here if I get this right. I recommend, how do we do this? Recommend,
Can't you just say as presented?
could do that too, but 510 personal services, 1,000,000 $277,099. Interfund at 561, inter-transfers, $575,934. 570 charges and expenditures, 1,318,000. And then 590 debt and interest on long-term debt, $1,740,223, for a total budget for water, the water department of $4,911,256.
Second,
Motion and a second. I'll go through the roll. Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
thank you. Sandy,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Paul's here, right?
yeah, yes,
Okay. Cody,
Yes.
Zach,
yes.
and I am also a yes, so that passes 8-0.
All right, next is the sewer budget.
And which article is this, Mike?
This is Article 5.
5, okay.
And John and Frank, basically the same here. The budget was the same except for the DPW director and the interfund transfers.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none.
Chairman,
Go ahead, Cody.
it's not necessarily related to the budget, but, I will, Frank, will y'all be on for the, discussion later on the article regarding the, Reed and Barton at the sewer going down that line?
Yes.
Okay.
We're gonna need you.
I was like, if you're not, then I was gonna ask you to stick around or address that, so.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
just curious, have we added any new sewer customers in this fiscal year? By any of I know there was work done on Main Street and so on and so forth. How many additional tie-ins have you done roughly in the past year? Is it pretty flat or is it?
It is a pretty small number. I would say under 10.
So you're not expecting any major change to the revenues coming in?
There hasn't been anything major right now. We have the building behind the McDonald's that has still yet to be completed. I believe it's 195 Mansfield Ave. When that is filled, we would expect to see some revenue generated from that facility. But they've been taking quite a bit of time to build that process out. Other than that, we've only seen a few house connections, not actually on West Main Street. We've had some on Newland Street, tying into the existing sewer that's down there. I think only one or two others on West Main Street that have connected.
Houses on Balfour Farm will be getting built too, on Pine Street.
Probably a year from now, I would say, is when we would see enough houses on the Balfour Farm property to notice any type of significant revenue coming from there. Right now, they have a trailer on site that's supposed to promote the sale of those new homes. They're saying that they can actually build one home every 3 or 4 months, which I would think would be very impressive to see if that can happen. Whether they can build them and sell them is two different things.
What about on both the water and sewer, and what kind of stress between all the apartments being put in, the home construction and everything else that's been going on? I know you guys tied in the industrial park a couple of years ago. what kind of stress is that gonna put on the system? You got enough water to sustain this? You got enough sewer capacity?
We do have enough of both, yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any more discussion or questions? Okay, then the chair would entertain a motion for budget 60 sewer enterprise.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Bill?
I recommend we approve the sewer enterprise budget as follows. 510 personal services in the amount of $460,359. 561 intertransfers in the amount of $153,547. Charges and expenditures 570 in the amount of $1,417,251. And debt service 590 in the amount of $397,440 for a total budget of $2,428,597.
Second,
Right, got a motion and a second. We'll do the roll again. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Paul?
yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. That is 8-0.
All right. Next is Article 9 on the warrant. Frank?
Article 9 should be before you. We're asking to have basically leftover funds transferred to two projects, one of which a portion of this money, actually let me back up, the leftover funds are actually from the Wells 5 and 6 project. We had extra money from that. The total amount of extra was $605,476.24. So we're actually asking to reappropriate that total amount into two different areas. We're looking for transferring $178,984 to pay associated costs with remaining engineering for Southwest or East Hodges water main replacement projects. Those are two that are ARPA funded, but the engineering costs are not funded through ARPA. And the remaining balance of that money, $426,492.24, we're asking for that to go to engineering, investigation, and design for construction of either a new treatment facility at Well 3 because of the PFAS exceedance that we had there, and or to cover all of these same issues at any of the other wells that we have, including upgrades to the existing treatment facility. I know we had talked before about looming changes to the PFAS and PFOA MCLs. Those have come down. Enforcement is not currently being made, but within the next few years, they expect everybody to be on track. So basically, the original EPA number was 70 parts per trillion. The new number for the same contaminants is 4 parts per trillion. Massachusetts standard is still at 20 parts per trillion, but they will follow suit and equal or tighten up the numbers as Mass DEP commonly does. So there's a very short window of time to act on that. We're talking multi-million-dollar facilities at each of the wells if they do exceed. So this is just a way to start off the investigational phase. There's a lot of engineering that has to go into it, and determination of placement and what type of filtration unit would be necessary to bring the existing levels at each particular facility low enough to meet the new standards. So that's why we're asking for that money to be appropriated now instead of using it on a different project.
Frank, I did see that got passed. You're probably way more tied into this or tuned into this than I am. Do you expect that there will be any lawsuits or anything like that that might delay things? I'm not suggesting we delay, but I'm just curious if, you know, that might happen.
We do not actually have the option to delay, which is pretty unique. So there are pending lawsuits going on with companies that are currently in existence, still contributing to the problem. There are lawsuits going on with others who may or may not be involved, as far as like secondary and third parties. So right now, everybody's kind of looking to point the finger at people, and we as water suppliers still have to come up with a solution to the existing problem, even though it still remains coming into the system, you know, from other polluted areas, whether it be from, you know, anything that you can think of that's waterproof is going to have a PFAS or PFOA contaminant on it. Anything non-stick, you know, the list goes on and on and on, and each of us have all those things in our own homes right now, including myself. It's something that's going to take a long time to go away, even if they said right now, you know, you can't use those products no more. Everybody's not just going to throw them away. So unfortunately, we're going to deal with this long before any lawsuits or anything, any settlements come down or anything. We can only hope that we would, you know, be involved with some of the settlements when the payments are there, if there's any money left. There's so many different people that are involved with this. And, you know, the larger corporations have much better lawyers than a lot of the smaller cities and towns and water departments do. So if there's a loophole, they're going to find it. So we're not anticipating any funding. If we get something great, but, you know, now's the time to start. Like I said, we already have one well that had the exceedance at well 3. That's been offline since October. With these new contaminant levels, we run the possibility when our next detect or testing round is required that we could have additional wells that would bring us right back to the same situation as we are with well 3. And we may not have the option of turning it off and still being able to supply the town with water. So there's a multi-level of concern here, and this is just a starting point to get us moving in the right direction.
And remind me, well 3 was over the previous level, right? Not the new level?
That is correct. Well 3 historically tested right in the teen range, 12, 13, 14. We had 2 samples that came in above the 20, but because of the sampling parameters that we were under, it's the average for the quarter. So we take 1 sample per month, 3 samples per quarter. That average is what DEP looked at. We've went from the beginning of when we had the sample till up until last October, and believe it or not, we actually exceeded by 1 part per trillion with the average. So that well came offline. It's going to cost us millions of dollars to put back online because we were over by 1 part per trillion with the old standard. You know, obviously out down to the 4. And the other action levels that they have in place, we would have exceeded anyway, but it would have been nice to have that water up until now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I need you for a minute.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Zach.
a couple of quick questions. Oh, he's run off, so I got a couple of questions on PFAS, so I'll wait till he comes back.
He'll be right back.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for Frank to come back, I got a question for Mike.
Sure, Cody.
Mike, where are these bond proceeds accounted for in the budget currently? They're not on the I don't know what you call it, the account sheet that James provided.
This is money that was borrowed for projects previously, and they didn't. There was money left over when the projects were completed, so it's not in. It's just in the articles for that.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
He was asking where the money is accounted for, and I said the money was borrowed previously for these other projects, so it's just accounted for within the debt right now.
Yeah, this is already money that was appropriated to be borrowed for another project, which was the wells 5 and 6 replacement. Because we did not spend all of the borrowed funds, we're required to use that in some way, shape, or form within a very short period of time, because the borrowed money cannot accrue interest. It's actually, you can get penalized for that. So we've gone through quite a few of the books. I think you guys may remember this. You know, we've been back before you guys a few times to try and clean up the books and reappropriate leftover funds, whether it be from retained earnings or from borrowed projects like this one. And this is just another one of those steps.
So if these are time sensitive, borrowing funds that, is that gonna offset your need for the use of retained earnings then?
This would eliminate us having to use retained earnings to start this process, but again, it's only a small step towards the total goal.
Zach, we'll go back to you.
Frank, on a couple things on PFAS. The 4 parts per trillion you're referring to, was that the ruling that just came down a couple of weeks that I saw a blip of on the news, or is that something different?
That is the ruling that you saw, for specific contaminants related to what we used to call PFAS 6. Now they're pulling it apart even more. They're focusing on PFAS and PFOA, and they actually have what they call an MCLG, which is a maximum contaminant level goal. That's actually set at 0. So that's what they ask you to try and achieve, and they set the maximum contaminant level that you're not supposed to exceed at 4. So if you can stay in that range between 0 and 4, you're doing okay. Unfortunately, I don't know of any community that can do that.
Well 3 that you're referring to, is that the well on Newland Street?
That is correct, sir.
And that particular well is not connected to the existing treatment plant at all currently?
That is correct. Due to its location, the cost to plumb that directly over and blend with the existing treatment facility were, it didn't make the project feasible. So we are still looking at that as an option now that we have something to compare it to, which would be a multi-million-dollar PFAS facility being built there or on adjacent water department land across the street. We still got to come up with some ideas. This is where this engineering money would be well spent. And even though we come up with what we feel is a solid idea, it still has to move through DEP and the EPA for final approval.
And what kind of numbers are you currently getting of water that goes into the treatment plant for PFAS? Are those single digits? Are they?
So we have 3 wells that feed the current treatment plant right now. Based on the current parameters in place, we have what's called a combined sample that we take, one from the outflow at the water treatment facility. Those numbers there have been below 4, but not by much. We've seen 3.2s, we've seen 2.9s. We have the option, if we have one of those 3 wells that tends to be on the higher range, and we think that's where our numbers are coming from, to do what's called a blend, where we can lower the capacity coming out of one of the wells and increase the water capacity coming out of the other 2, assuming that they're the lower numbers, to keep the number in the optimum range below the MCL. If we continue to have, unfortunately, more rain than we really need, it changes how the aquifer filters out these type of contaminants that are unfortunately in the aquifer. It's not something that it's purposely created by anything we do, but everything water related affects the contaminant levels that we sample for. There's been no rhyme or reason. We've tried to trend this when we were tracking our well 3. We thought we actually had a pretty good track on it, that when we saw heavier rainfalls that we would see an increase in the PFAS. And just when we thought we actually had a decent track on it, it totally flipped on us, and we actually got one of our lower numbers after having a very heavy deluge of rain. So there's many things that take into account what happens with the aquifer, many of which are out of our control. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get any good trending on that before we had to take it offline.
But it seems to me the direction they're going, it's going to be, whether it's this year, next year, the following year, it's heading towards a 0 number. Would you agree with that?
100%. I think that has been their effort all along, and they've just now found ways to get to that point. And unfortunately, to get to that number, many of our other facilities have already looked at it. You're possibly looking at doing an RO plant, which is extremely expensive to operate. You need extremely high volumes of electricity to run them. It's not something to take lightly. If you're going to step that way, it requires a whole different level of treatment operators, different classifications, different training. If that's their ultimate goal, we really would like to hear from DEP or EPA that that's where we should be trending, instead of wasting money putting these smaller filtration facilities in that will get us by for a little while. If we're going to do it, we would like to know up front, and we've sent letters We've had, backup from some of, the congressman's office and stuff, looking for those same answers, to basically give the water departments and the water districts a better direction on how to proceed with this, knowing that the assumption's always there that they're gonna better themselves with their rules.
Now, I saw that Mansfield has already got a plant operating for PFAS, and I think they spent, and I don't know what year it was built within the last couple, and I think they spent about $5 million on that facility. And I also read that Middleborough just approved at town meeting a construction of a facility to deal with PFAS. So my question to you is, the plant we have now is what, 4 or 5 years old? When did the word PFAS come into the water department? I mean, did we know about this before we constructed the initial plant? When did this become an issue that you were made aware of?
Yeah, so PFAS has been around for a very long time. What ended up happening is we take routine samples every year and every other year, and we take what's called UCMR. It's Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule. Basically, all the water departments and water districts take a gamut of samples, hundreds of thousands of dollars over years of time, and all of that information goes into their database. So they'll look at microcontaminants that may have very minute sample detects, and they'll see a pattern evolve, say in this area, 3 or 4 communities or what. And as that number, starts getting higher or trending higher, then they start focusing on it and they put an action level in place. If communities are having problems reaching and staying under that action level without doing any type of major filtration or coagulants or anything like that to their existing, that prompts additional investigation. And they didn't have enough information on PFAS, PFOA, or any of the other contaminants that they're looking at now. So they changed the requirements for what the standards were for the detect. So they went from parts per million to parts per trillion. And now they got the numbers that they were looking for to have everything flare up in, basically across the country for, it started off as PFAS 6, now they're up to 27 contaminants. So the harder you look for something, you're going to find it, and that's exactly what the goal of the EPA is. They want to remove these harmful contaminants from, basically drinking water, from anything that we put into our bodies, food-wise. So, they are going to continue looking for it, and that's why we're looking for a solution from them for what the end purpose is. We know it's zero. We want their recommendations on how they expect us to get there with the least amount of problems from that. And I mean this as far as, we add chlorine to our water for disinfection. You have to have enough chlorine in your water for disinfection to kill off any viruses that are there. Well, unfortunately, there's byproducts that happen from chlorine, and that's where you see the THMs, and that was one of the notices that just recently went out. So there's always a negative to something that good comes out of a treatment process, and we want to see what the least negatives are going to be based on the treatment process that we want to install. And we're trying to be tactful and ask these questions in a certain way and not come across, as aggressive, because we want to make sure that we're making the right decision and spending the money appropriately. And to date, we have yet to get a good answer out of anybody we've spoken to.
So before the existing treatment plant was constructed, there was no talk of PFAS, and we may have to deal with that as to incorporate it into that plan, or is this that something came up really in the last couple of years? I'm just trying to say, we built the plant, I never heard of this, and then all of a sudden now it's an issue, and for a resident that's not involved like you are obviously every day in the minutia of things, they're saying, we just built the plant, now you tell us we need to build another one. So, we got to try to explain that so people understand it.
So the simplest way is that the samples were taken, the contaminants were known about, we had non-detects at the sampling parameter that was required at the time. The facility was built, new wells went in afterwards, which, as you all know, I voiced my opinion about that before. Definitely should have been the other way around. The new wells went in at that time. They were looking at PFAS. Each of our wells sampled and came back lower than the requirements for an indicated MCL exceedance. So those wells continued to move forward. And that now we're at the position now with the recent changes in the regulations that are going to flare up and could potentially cause us issues. So yes, there was no purpose to design any other removal system to that facility other than iron and manganese removal, which oddly enough is the base removal that's required before you can remove a PFAS and a PFOA from the water. So that's where our plants are going to be very costly because we have iron and manganese in our natural groundwater, which we would see over at well 3 and over at well 1, which are unfiltered locations. So not only would we have to build a PFAS, PFOA removal facility, we have to remove the iron and manganese from it first. So you're looking at a multi-stage facility that has to be built on each of those properties.
And you're thinking it'd be cheaper to do that than to do the pipe work to get it all into one facility?
Well, that's what we're looking at because the concern is, for lack of better terms, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. If we have all of our wells plumbed into one facility and God forbid we have an issue with that facility, act of God, tree falls down, whatever, now you're in a situation where you're doing an emergency connection with the surrounding town, you're purchasing water from them, or you can't even support fire suppression services because the remaining wells that are there don't have enough to supply the town. It gets into a very tricky situation with cost over means, whereas if we had two separate facilities at the non-treated wells that we currently have, it would give us additional locations to pull from. And just some background, we're trying to get additional capacity approved from well 1, which is down on Pine Street, to make it feasible to put a removal system there. Right now we're limited to 200 gallons a minute, and the cost to spend there, even just to remove the manganese that we still deal with there on occasion, it just, the math just doesn't work. We need more water available to come out of the ground in order to invest in that.
So on that note, where are you on well replacement? You had a program to replace 3 wells. Are they done? Are those operational? What's the overview on that?
Yeah, 2 wells are up and running. Those are wells 5 and 6. That's related to this article here with the extra money. Well 4 is the next one to go in line. Believe it or not, you may remember I had at one point mentioned we were getting some money from Congressman Auchincloss. There's been multiple hoops and multiple dances that we've had to make to come up with that. This money that was at 5 and 6 here was not eligible for that because of the transfer and borrowing that had to happen from short term to long term. So we are paying back that note. The good thing is that money that was approved to come to Norton is still Norton's money. We're going to use that to fund the replacement well of well number 4, move it a little bit further away from the Winnicott Pond where it is now. We found some favorable soil conditions compared to its current location. So that's why we're going to move it a little bit further away. Hopefully that's some natural filtration there. And then the leftover money that we have earmarked to Norton, we are going to ask for a change in the congressional language so that we can also use that for PFAS and other filtration opportunities. That's a process that's going to take some time, but we've basically got the head nod that it would be something that is possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Actually, I have one, Frank, and that is zero really possible? I know you mentioned sort of the very expensive plant, but is even that going to make it zero?
There is a possibility of getting a zero if you're willing to put the money there.
We may have no choice, Frank, if that's what they're, it's another one of those mandates without any funding.
Exactly.
That was going to be my question. Is there any indication that that there's going to be money made available from the manufacturers of PFAS that are responsible for all of this in our drinking water? 3M being, like, it was DuPont first and 3M bottom, I think, and like all the chemical companies that made this and said, oh, it's fine, it's good, you're fine. And I mean, they're the ones that are 100% responsible for the fact that this is now in every drop of water that goes through anybody's body right now.
You are exactly right. We have not heard of any monies coming directly from them. Anything that has been discussed has been through basically lawsuits. You're forcing them to take money and give it back to the communities or to the suppliers who are having to mediate these problems. Oddly enough, the companies that have created the issue long ago are also the same companies that we are going to be buying the material to remove the problem from, just because of the nature of the product. So
We have signed on with one of the law firms for the class action lawsuit.
Good. Is there, I'm not thinking about this because I'm on well water where I am. And that well 3 is the closest to me because I'm in the Cays. So I'm now looking at, do I get a home test? If that came through, Mike, and let's say the town was awarded, would there be any portion of that for individual homeowners that are on well that isn't associated with the town water system to tap into that, or would they each individually have to sign on to a class action?
That is a good question. I'm not sure. I would imagine something we can look at, whether as part of the class action lawsuit, we could help people that have wells that are contaminated if there's water available to tie in.
Frank, from your expertise, you're talking about a reverse osmosis system to essentially remove that. If somebody was concerned about this in their home and that they have a well themselves, is that something that if they put in a reverse osmosis system in their home to treat the entire home, that would resolve the issue?
there are some smaller systems that have been designed to work in what they call like a mini community, like a Dunkin' Donuts, Cumberland Farm, where they have a decent amount of traffic flow, more so than a resident. I haven't heard of any individual personal systems that would be cost effective. And again, even the systems that were talked about before were all referencing the 20 parts per trillion mass DEP level. I do not know, and I did not research any further if any of those were capable of getting down to this 4 or the 0 goal. I live in Rehoboth, so there's no town water over there. Everybody's on private wells. All of the restaurants and all of us they all have to deal with this now. And there was some talk a while back from the EPA that there could be some control coming down from the boards of health over private wells to mandate testing. There's been no more talk about that, but I would have to assume at some point they would probably want to know, what is in the well water, whether it be at point of sale or if they can mandate it 1 or 2 tests per year, something like that. Obviously, it's great to know what's in your well. I test mine frequently myself, but it's also sometimes a fear of the unknown and what is going to be required of them if somebody tests and they can't afford to put in a system. Does it put a black mark on their home? Even if they don't choose to drink the water, they obviously would still have to bathe in it, wash clothes with it. So, I can understand it's a double-edged sword, myself included.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that Zach?
Yeah, Cody, just the article I was reading just last week, 65% of municipal water supplies have tested for PFAS in this country on a national level. So I just can't imagine there's not going to be some federal money down the road. We may not be able to wait that long, but it is a national problem coast to coast.
Yeah, I can tell you from the insurance side, because that's my world. PFAS, all the P's have been excluded under environmental liability policies for
Really?
close to a decade, probably. So they knew this was coming long before anybody else, because they started seeing the claims coming in.
Wow.
And the stuff isn't banned, so it just keeps getting worse every day.
I removed all of it from my house. Personally, all the cookware and stuff in my house is gone.
You gotta start somewhere.
Any other discussion? All right, then the chair would entertain a motion on Article 9.
Mr. Chair, right
Yes.
before that, can we just go over the three numbers again? Was the first one $605,476.24?
That's correct.
And was the next one 178 or 78?
178,984.
And then the third one would have been 426, 492.24.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Bill?
I recommend how are you supposed to say this?
You make a motion that you recommend.
I make a motion, we recommend Article 9 for a total of $605,476.24, of which $178,984 is to be earmarked for the costs associated with the South Worcester Street and East Hodges Street water main replacement. And the balance, $426,492.24 for costs associated with engineering, design, and whatnot on the water treatment plant.
Second.
Motion and a second. We'll go to the vote. Kevin?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Cody?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That is 8-0.
All right, next is Article 10. I'll just go over the slides that were being presented tonight to refresh your memory. Probably skip through some of them.
Before you jump into that,
Yeah.
Mike, I just want to, for the purposes of the meeting, I expect some lively discussion, so please make sure that you ask to be recognized before you jump in. Why don't I keep control of the meeting?
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
So the project itself is 4,800 feet of 8-inch gravity sewer, and that will run from Elm Street, down Elm Street, include Miller Terrace, and run to Reservoir. There'll be one wastewater pump station as part of the project. All the sewer is gravity, and there'll be 4,500 linear feet of water main improvements on Elm Street. And just to refresh, so all the design right now has been funded, entirely grant funded from MassWorks, and we also have received from MassWorks for construction a grant of $3.5 million. Everyone knows the history of the site, and we've had EPA out there doing some cleanup. We've had a phase 1, phase 2 study on the site. We've demoed, spent about $500,000 demoing the portion of the building that was a threat to fall onto Cross Street. As part of the master plan, this was a priority economic target area, and the infrastructure investments are needed to promote the economic development. And Devco North America is the company that went before town meeting and had the property rezoned to village commercial. And they're looking to develop 140 to 150 apartments at the site and some commercial space. Right now, Devco says they've claimed control of the site. I've asked our attorneys to let us know exactly how they've claimed control. They said they went to the bankruptcy court and received control of the site. They are now working on a covenant not to sue from DEP, and hopefully moving forward from there.
Mike, what does that mean, a covenant?
A covenant not to sue, that would protect them if they go on site and say they end up not developing the site. They're not going to be a responsible party, a PRP.
Okay, thank you.
So the total cost of the project, the water main work is 2 million to 2.4 million. The sewer work, 5.3 to 6 million. The Mass Works grant will pay 3.5 million of that. Water rates will fully fund the water main project. That's 2 million to 2.4 million. Then the remaining portion is for the sewer project. So on the right, you'll see betterments, which per home, 8.6 to $12,000 for a betterment. And so the betterment is paid, it's an assessment on the property, and you can pay it off at once, or you can pay it over 20 years. If you choose to pay it over 20 years, right now it would look like it would be at a 5% interest rate. And so that would be anywhere from $600 to $900 a year for the betterments. And the total on the betterments is $550,400 to $768,000 for that, funding a portion of the project. That leaves the balance of 1.8 to 2.5 million. And so that has to either be borne by a developer of that property, or if a developer isn't working on the property right when the project is completed, obviously the town would then have to stop paying that note and putting a lien on the property to be paid back for that cost. And I know as part of the betterments, when people are assessed betterments, when they tie in the sewer, there is no tie-in fee. They have to pay the cost to the contractor to tie them in, but the water and sewer department doesn't charge them a tie-in fee because they paid betterments. And as you know, at one of the previous town meetings, they changed it to 7 years. You're supposed to tie in the sewer anywhere from 1 year to 7 years after it's put in. The maximum is 7 years that you're supposed to be tied in. And so right now, this is, they're looking at potential sites for the pump station. And one of the sites they're looking at is the library property, town of Norton Library.
Like if they chose that site, where would it be? I'm kind of wondering, like, is it going to be visible from the street? Will we be able to put landscaping in there? Like, will we have to move the gazebo? You know, those sorts of things.
If you're looking at the property where you pull it in, where the sign is, all the way to the left, there's a stone wall, and there's some the corner of the property, not where any of the trees with the plaques are, but basically behind that. There's a lot of heavy undergrowth at the corner of that property before it goes to the next town lot. That's the area we were initially looking for a footprint to go. There is some talk even of possibly not doing an actual building there, and possibly doing something with just the wet well and actually an operational cabinet, similar to what we have down on Alford Reservoir across from Holly Road. Still up in the air about costs and what we can and cannot put there. We still need the approval to actually put it on that site, which is, everything's still being worked on. We're actually in the middle of a meeting right now with the public, getting some feedback on this.
Sorry for the poor scheduling.
No, that's fine.
So that is the project. I know from some of the feedback today, some of the public was saying, well, why do we on Elm Street have to pay betterments for a project that benefits the whole town? And that's why I mentioned the betterments of 550,000 to 768,000 of the project, but the total sewer work is 5.3 to 6 million. So the betterments, if a fraction of the project, are small. I know to some people that will $600 to $900 a year may seem like a lot, but as far as the total project, the majority of it is not being paid, is not a burden on to those 64 houses along the way.
Mr. Chair?
Cody,
A couple of things. I guess the first question's for Frank. The betterments, assessments, the calculation for that, is it $35 per gallon based on 110 gallons per day, minimum 3-bedroom home for 330? Is that the calculations being used right now?
It is not. Betterment calculations are done differently. They're done by equivalent dwelling units. So basically, whatever constitutes a single-family home, whether it be a condo, a house and an apartment, that's how an EDU is equivalent. If that's a word, it's getting late. The sewer connection fee, the one that you mentioned, which is based on the Title V flows and figures, is for a property that's fronted by sewer that wasn't able to or was not originally assessed a betterment. So this falls in line with the houses that are on Plain Street that connected, that had gravity sewer there. They paid based on bedroom count. This falls in those fees fall in line with areas down the Grove and down King Philip. So there are different rates involved based on how the project was presented and based on the funding of the project.
Right. What's the calculation for these? Because this is essentially Elm Street. It's the houses down Elm Street that would be assessed this, right?
That's correct. They would be the only ones that would be assessed the betterment because the project betters that area by fronting them with sewer.
And that's, if they're looking at what it's going to cost them, what's the calculation for them?
So it based on whatever the cost of the project. So if the project comes in at the 7.3 million, it would cost them $8,600. If it comes in at the higher number, it would cost them $12,000.
That's each house is that
Yeah.
number regardless.
Yep.
Each EDU, just to be clear. If there's a single family home, it's one EDU. If it's a duplex, it's 2 EDUs. So you may have one person that owns a piece of property, maybe a duplex. That's considered 2 EDUs. So there's just to have the clarification there.
Okay, and is that 7.3 that's the total including the grant amount?
Yes.
So there's no break for the fact that the grant was, like, you don't get a reduction for using the is it a state grant?
Well, they do because the total cost goes down. So if we didn't have the $3.5 million grant, then you'd be looking at numbers a lot higher than 8,600 and 12,000.
The cost of the project as a whole didn't go down because of the grant, but the grant is taking off 3.5 million from that, whatever the ending cost of the project is.
I'm just confused at how that works, because if the 7.3 million total budgeted cost includes the 3.5, I'm not sure I'm following the math.
So the total cost is, say, 7.3.
Mhm.
So 3.5 is coming off of that. That's
Okay,
being,
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was being dense. The other thing I was gonna say is, this is one instance where literally running these lines down that immediately improves the value, even if they don't tap into it, and like just the access to the water and sewer is one thing, but these lines are critical for Holdco to tear down that Reed and Barton property and develop it into something nice, which is going to improve their property value in the long run. So the betterment piece of it, I feel like, is probably a secondary conversation, because immediately, as soon as that eyesore is torn down, even if they don't build anything there, as soon as that's gone, their property value goes up. Which is great for them, happy for them. I think the biggest question here from everybody is going to be on the remaining share, and responsibility for that. I'll preemptively say this because I feel like someone's probably going to mention it. This is probably a gating issue for, like, having water and sewer run down that street is, Holdco has to have that. But the amount that they're putting into investing in that property, do you have a sense that 1.8 million or 2.5 million added onto the top of that is going to push them over the edge of killing the project?
We had mentioned it to them. We had a meeting with them, and we actually had a meeting this week with another developer, because we told them, we're not waiting, for you to hold us up if we can find someone else. And it didn't seem to bother them. So I think and as the engineer said tonight, it's well worth it for them, for the benefit they're gonna get having that sewer come down. I know there's gotta be a cleanup cost, but still, they felt it would benefit it.
So there's a possibility that 1.8 or 2.5 could be borne by Holdco or recouped from them if
Yes.
they go forward.
Yep.
That's the plan right now. As you mentioned, though, if they get cold feet or they pull out partway through, unfortunately, that's now borne by the town. Even though we can assess a lien on that property, it just makes it a little bit more difficult to try and find a potential buyer for it, knowing the difficulties that property also already has. I think originally they were anticipating having these resources provided to them at no cost and just paying a connection fee. And unfortunately, even with the grant, we're still talking about a pretty significant amount of money for both water and sewer on such a small road. It's just unfortunate, and the timing of it, obviously, we know is very difficult as well.
Okay. Last question. You mentioned the pump station. I'm assuming that there aren't any houses, that the pump station is going to cause any pressure issues where we ended up on Plain Street, where only certain people were assessed the betterment because the other ones where the pump station was pressurizing the line too high, can't ever actually connect to it. So it just ended up being like, what was it, 6 houses there?
Correct. Based on the current design, this is going to be a gravity sewer. Everybody fronted will have a connection, able to connect to it, barring possibly 1 or 2 houses that may sit below the road. They may need a pump system that hasn't been 100% determined yet. The initial thought was an initial plan would be everybody be a gravity connection. If some of the feedback we get tonight from this public informational hearing, if any of that comes into play and we start looking at other options, there is the potential that's been thrown out there for a dedicated force main just to provide this property with sewer and not properties fronted along the way. From a personal standpoint, I think that's a foolish idea. You're digging up the road. You should have connections there. They're fronted by it. They should, obviously have some skin in the game. As a business standpoint, it would be great because you would now have an opportunity to build out that property. The cost associated with it would be borne by that property or by that developer. We still have to do the water improvements there. So again, there's no sense of digging up the road twice. We would have to do them piggybacked, which is the exact reason why that road was paved 3 years ago, because this project has been going on for some time. Keith had money he had to spend, and that was one road that was falling apart, so it went there, knowing that this was going to take another quarter, 3, 4, 5 years until anything moved forward with it. So at that time, we agreed that we would take up the additional cost of what it would be to do the full reclaim on the road, anticipating both utilities were going to go in and give the opportunity if the gas company or cable company was also looking to do any upgrade work down there. So that was kind of some talks that we had going on behind the scenes. I know everybody says, well, that road was just paved, it's foolish. Well, it had to maintain as long as it has till now.
Thanks, Frank.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
One sec, Bill. I want to make sure that I'm understanding this because, as Frank said, it's late. So if the remaining share is borne by the developer, the betterments go away?
no,
No. Okay.
that's an addition to.
Go ahead, Bill.
But we would have to borrow that up front and then transfer that to the developer. Right, like we would have to take that out to do the work, and then it would be a reimbursement from the developer.
Right, and depending on how long it is before we have a developer, that would be a burden on the town to make those payments each year.
Go ahead, Bill.
So, I many questions, comments here. So the first thing is, we structure the betterment as, hey, it's $900 a year or $1,000 a year or whatever over so many years. That we're totally ignoring the cost to these homeowners to actually dig up their yard from their foundation to this connection. So that's an additional cost that these people have to bear by themselves. So it's not just, $900, $1,000 a year for X number of years. It's way more than that. So we should recognize that before just kind of saying, no big deal. I guess the second thing is, the way this is being presented, whether or not, what were they called, DevCo? I forget the name. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they actually do what they want to do, we're doing this. So we can do this, and if we're lucky and DevCo says, we changed our mind, if we're lucky, maybe someone else comes in. If we're unlucky, then it just sits there, has a nice sewer, has a nice water main. We still have a decrepit building. And again, all these people are out serious dollars for no good reason. So that concerns me. I think it was Zach who said X number of meetings ago, and I think you guys have also mentioned it, that in your informational meeting, people are saying, this is more of a town project. Getting rid of that blighted site isn't just an Elm Street issue. That's really a betterment to the whole town. So to again think that we should just have these 50, 60, whatever houses bear the brunt of it is a little unfair. I really have a problem with that. Because I understand the big goal, let's get rid of this blighted site. What happens after that, you know, that's a whole different story. But at least we can get rid of it. But that's the betterment to the town, not just to Elm Street. And I will disagree with Cody. If I'm at the end of Elm Street where the library is, Reed and Barton standing or gone does nothing to my property. If I'm next to the property and it disappears, yep, my property value is going to go up. So it's a very small group of people who will benefit from it actually disappearing. You know, the rest of the people on the street, not so much. And I don't know. I could go on. In theory, I agree with, you know, hey, if we can get someone to get rid of the blighted site, great. But I have a tough time saying that, you know, 50, 60 families have to bear the brunt of it, because it's more than what you're displaying here.
Mr. Chairman,
Zach,
I will have to agree 100% with my colleague, Mr. Rotundi. This project is a project for the town. It is not a project, not just a betterment for the 50 people that are there. I just couldn't imagine myself living there. Maybe I just put in a brand new septic system because I didn't see this coming. And all of a sudden, because we want to get rid of this disaster that's over there, which I agree needs to go and something needs to happen, I'm foot with a $10,000, $12,000 bill. Then you tear up my driveway. Oh, I have to pay for the excavation within 7 years and all this out. I think it's unfair. It's unfair and it's unjust. I mean, it's bad enough that we're changing zoning. We have now zoning du jour in this town that, you know, we hit this building, so we're gonna take it from residential and make it village commercial. Well, maybe I should build an industrial plant on my house property, and maybe we'll rezone that next. So now we're gonna put this burden on these residents, and I just think it's completely unfair. If you want to do it, pass it on to the ratepayers of the sewer evenly. That's better than, or the town altogether evenly. That's better than just giving it to these few people that are there that didn't ask for it, and they're going to be hit broadside with it. And for that reason, I can't support this.
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
So obviously I look at it a little differently. The housing authority needed sewer, and we went down West Main Street, and everyone along the way was charged a betterment. Same thing. And the other way to look at it is by having a large project like the housing authority funding a good portion of that sewer project, it made it financially feasible to do that sewer project. And it's the same here. You have a large portion of this project being funded, hopefully by a developer. You have a $3.5 million grant because of the potential of developing that site. So sewer going down the street, the cost to these 64 homeowners along the street is now reduced because you have the MassWorks grant and you have a potential development at that site. And I remind you, that site was zoned industrial. It was rezoned to village commercial. So if we didn't have Reed and Barton there, and we didn't have the MassWorks grant, and there are properties along that way, not just this building, there are other properties whose systems are failing. One of the assessors was in today who was on Talbot Road. Someone just put in a septic system on Talbot Road. It cost them $40,000. So I'm sure there might be some homes that have great septic systems along there, but I'm sure from the age of those houses, there are some that don't. And
for them to be able to get sewer out in front of their house in the long run, it's gonna greatly benefit them. I know you can look at just the expense of it, but you also have to look at the value this adds to that property. And you have technically 7 years to tie in, so it's not like the second this project is done, you gotta tie in. And who's gonna go chasing them at 7 years? I don't, that's up to the Board of Health to decide if they're gonna do that. I don't think you're gonna see the Board of Health knocking on someone's door at 7 years, 1 day and demand that they tie into the sewer. If their system's failing, I'm sure they're gonna do that, but unless their system's failing, I'm sure the Board of Health isn't gonna start cracking their whip on someone.
Mr. Chairman.
Zach, yeah, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
So I guess to that point, Mike, I would say, so what do you tell the homeowner that's on that street that just spent, that may be on that street, I don't know this, that using your example, that may have just spent $40,000 a new septic, and then we're gonna go over there and hit him over the head with another 12,000 and say, within 7 years, you're gonna tie in for another 10,000. You just put him in bankruptcy. That's what you just did. So again, for that reason, I will not be supporting this.
It was funny, tonight, I think there were some people that said, well, we love having the sewer out there, so we know we have the insurance that if our system fails, we have to tie in. We just don't want to pay a betterment. Well, that's not the way sewer projects work. That's not the way it worked on West Main Street. And so,
Mike, how many EDUs were there on West Main Street?
you know,
Close to 100, I
100,
believe.
yeah,
About
about 100.
100, almost 100.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Bill.
The biggest difference in your example, though, Mike, is that the housing authority was in existence and had people had need. We're just hoping, and that's the big difference. We're just hoping that this developer or some other developer comes in and says, that's the site I want to build whatever. Right? And that's a major difference. And there are plenty of polluted sites across the country that stay vacant. So, if this developer actually had money in the game and actually fully owned the property and was showing some true commitment, I think differently. But this is more of a hope that if we do X, that they'll follow through. And that's a lot of money to spend on a hope.
Cody, you're up.
Did you find me?
I did, yeah, go ahead.
So I guess my question is going to be, I feel like the betterment's it becomes a secondary conversation because anyone along that route, if you're trying to sell your home and you drive past that, or someone's looking at buying a home and they drive past Weed and Barton, I mean it's a huge turnoff immediately. Anybody that drives past it knows that. So I feel like the betterments are a secondary part. The main concern, Mike, is obviously the actual cost of the tie-in being 10, 15, 20,000, depending on how long the line is from the current existing septic system to the stub at the street, depending on the excavation, and then if they have to do a pump to get it up, if it's terrain requires them to go uphill or whatever to get to the street. So that's the biggest kind of hurdle here that can't be borne over the course of a period of time. And if you're saying, listen, the town isn't going to come after you at 7 years, this project is a critical need for that project to ever get done for anyone, DevCo or anyone, to come in and tear that down. The town is not going to tear that down. The town is not going to take control of that property. It's going to have to be somebody that specializes in brownfield development. Is there a way we can build something into this article that, as it's presented, to say, listen, we will waive the 7-year requirement for this project specifically. You do not have to tie in within 7 years unless your septic fails, then you have to tie in. But honestly, if your septic fails, it's going to probably end up being less. It's $40,000 to do a septic now. That's insane. $15,000 a time to sewer would be a fraction of that. So if we could build that in, is that a compromise that would get other members on the committee here tonight to support this?
I think that came up at the meeting, and one of the commissioners actually reminded everyone that that is not a something that is enforced by the Water and Sewer Department. That's a bylaw, a town bylaw, the 7-year. It was, I think it was 2, it got raised to 5, and then it got raised to 7. But that is a town bylaw that would have to be changed.
Does it have to have a bylaw, or can it be a specific article for this one specific time? Because we did the same thing where we waived the tie-in fees or whatever for the historical district or whatever it was.
We would have to check with town council. It is a bylaw, so I don't know if we can just waive something for one project when it is actually in the bylaws, but I'll ask.
Okay. I know that we waived the connection fees or whatever for town properties, and
Yeah.
I think that would still be subject to the bylaw.
That would have been a water and sewer policy, the connection fees,
Okay.
not a town bylaw.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
to Cody's point, and it may nudge me one way or the other, but to Cody's point, I would think if you're looking for that type of waiver or whatever, I would stipulate failure of your septic or sale of your house.
Yeah,
I agree.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Kevin?
I mean, I was just reading up on similar things in the background, and there's a Provincetown did a similar project in 2022, and just reading the Cape Cod Times, 400 owners who had septic system installed after January of 2000 will not be required to connect or pay a betterment until their septic system fails, or when they choose to connect. So it wouldn't be precedent setting. It seems like other towns have done similar.
Is that private legislation or public?
I don't know. Mr. Chair?
Is that fine?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Kevin, do you know if that was privately funded or municipally funded? We have that option as well if a infrastructure improvement is installed and it's privately funded, that the requirement to tie in would only be point of sale or point of failure. Where this project is municipally funded, that's where the tie-in requirement steps up at 7 years.
This one, 25 million from grants and subsidies, 5 million from state paving funds and tax receipts, 45 million from betterments.
You could get a grant like that.
Yeah,
That'd be
exactly.
nice.
That's the only thing to think of here, guys. I mean, we know this is a very sensitive subject. We know it's a very small area, and we know it's targeted to this one piece of property, to get rid of, the eyesore and the problems that come with it. Again, I think they expected to have everything readily available, so it was turnkey. They're going to clean the property up they pay a connection fee, their water and sewer is right in their front yard. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to do that. This gives us one opportunity to move forward with that project. And the biggest thing to look at here is, and it's, you know, definitely not trying to sway anybody's opinions, is that $3.5 million number sitting right there. That's one of the highest grants that's ever been given to a municipality for a job of this size. You know, it's not something you sneeze at. We know that the state is pulling back funds. We've seen all of our budgets have to get crunched because of that. The chances of seeing that number come through again, even if we do try and apply in the future, are pretty slim to see anything similar to that. And we all have to assume that the cost of this project is going to increase and that grant is going to decrease. So the numbers that you see before you tonight might be the lowest that we're going to see if we are looking at putting something substantial similar to what's been presented tonight on that piece of property. There is opportunity there to put something else there, but this is what was presented to the town, and this is what we worked with, and this is how we came up, basically reverse engineering what is necessary to be there to meet what they're looking to build on that property to make their numbers work.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Zach.
the only other thing I would add to my previous comments is, even with all this, there's no guarantee that anything happens with that property. And we're on the hook for $2.5 million, and the residents are on the hook for $750,000, and we still have that eyesore. You know, is the town better served? We're gonna spend $5 million out of pocket on this. Is it better served to take control of the property, make a park out of it, try to clean it up? Can that be done with $5 million or less, and just have some open space? Then there's nothing. I mean, this is just, you have nothing here. I mean, I appreciate all the work the water department's not the water department's fault. You guys did what they asked you to do. So I mean, don't take that personally. You're doing your job 100%. But I'm saying, is this the best use of money? There's no guarantees of anything other than a possible $2.5 million to the taxpayer, and still the same blight that you have there already. So I mean, I think all that needs to be into consideration. Thanks.
So yeah, kind of on that note, you know, I too appreciate the work that's gone into this. I want to see this site get cleaned up. I support putting the sewer in there. But there's another piece of it, which is, you know, I would prefer to have a vote when we have a bigger representation of the FinCom. So Mike, I would hope you'd be able to go back and talk to town council and see if there's anything that we can do here to move the numbers around to kind of reduce the burden on people. And the reason I say that is, based on what I'm hearing tonight, the FinCom may not approve this, and that doesn't mean that it won't pass at town meeting, but it also sounds like there's some opposition to people at the you know, the informational session too. I would hate for this to go to town meeting and fail because of the numbers. You know, because then we're stuck with the site, which, you know, we know what goes on with that and so on. So, you know, trying to make this as palatable and attractive to people as possible, I think, is in everyone's best interest.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Is that Kevin? Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I would also just caveat to everybody that, I mean, I don't want to say field of dreams, you build it, they will come. But I mean, we can argue 6 of one, half dozen of the other, that, you know, hindsight will always be 20/20. We could get stuck with a blighted property and this line in there. But in the same instance, I mean, we've had a reputation anecdotally to be tough to deal with in the past. You know, we could end up with a blighted property if developers feel like we're just going to strong arm them. I'm not saying they're either right or wrong. But if we got to a situation the line went in, it's only going to ease if it doesn't work out with Devco. It's going to make the property more palatable to future developers. I don't want a line in the blighted project, but it's not like it's a detriment to getting that blighted property removed.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Kevin, but that's just me. I mean, I've lived in this town long enough to know that when it comes to financial issues, when it starts to hit people's pocketbooks, that they get very animated, let's say.
I understand. I honestly agree. We could debate that ad nauseum. It's always speculative. How much do you invest to entice versus the perception of strong arming? There's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. Again, my concern is that, you know, with the way that it stands now, even with the grant and everything else, and this potentially being the best numbers that we can get, that it still has a chance of, I would say a decent chance of failing at town meeting, just based on what I'm hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Cody.
Mike or Frank, what's the time frame on expiration of that grant, the 3.5 million?
There is a very short window on that. It is on the slide. I do not recall, and I do not want to misspeak. I would like to mention that you know, we really appreciate all of your comments. There is another informational session scheduled 2 weeks from today at the community room, I believe it's called.
Yeah, at the Housing Authority.
So if anybody was able to attend that and ask questions directly to the engineers and to the parties that would be there, we hope we have the same turnout as we did tonight. Just being in a different location, it may be less. But this is all information that we're looking for. That time frame we're looking for is FY24 to FY26 for that 3.5 million to be expended.
Did you say it was 2 weeks from tonight, Frank?
2 weeks, correct. I believe it's posted on the website.
So expended by 26, that means we've got to be broken ground and start drawing on it, or it just has to be like what initiates the time frame on it? Because FY26 is you know, a year away.
I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe that the plan was for, if it was to pass a town meeting, that construction would begin this coming fall and wrap up sometime before the end of FY26. So I'm not sure that, like you said, do we have to start drawing on it by then? I'm not sure if it needs to be finished and spent by then, or just begin drawing down by then. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Typically, you can ask for an extension if you have a project that's underway.
Yes.
If it hadn't started by the end date or the looming end date, there's a better chance that you're going to get denied on
Mr. Chairman?
Before you go, Zach, we haven't heard from Paul, Steve, or Sandy. I just want to give them the opportunity to speak if they want to.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
so Frank, you already fixed the bad water line on Reservoir Street. That was one of your weak links in the whole system over that side of town, correct?
that. That's correct, sir.
And this just gives us another feed between West Main and Reservoir, part of the grid system to really help when you have any kind of water main issues to recirculate water around and all that. So I'm 100% for the water main part of it for sure. I just had the same concern regarding the force within 7 years if you had a new septic system in there. I don't have a problem with the betterments. I do think it helps the people that's going by improve their value. So if there is a way to possibly tweak that with the Board of Health on that policy, Mike, that maybe that might be the sweetener that might make this go through, because there are some of the houses there are newer, and you might have a decent system that could go another 10, 15 years before they need to be playing with it, you know. So I know sometimes it's because you want additional flow. You need a certain amount of flow down the water main, the sewer main, to make it work. So, but yeah, good luck with it, Frank. Appreciate the work you're putting in.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, I think, you know, you said what I was thinking, that just, I really want to see this pass at town meeting. Anything that can be done to make it, I think, more palatable, so that objection of those people who have to pay to tie in is lessened or in some way relieved, would be, I think, more successful or more likely to be successful at town meeting.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Go ahead, Zach.
Have we've looked at all, I'm just running a line from that Reed and Barton property out to Main Street and just affecting the small group of houses. I think there are probably 2 or 3 that run that line instead of going all the way down.
I think the problem is there's another apartment complex. If you come from East Main Street, heading down Elm Street, beyond Reed and Barton, there's an apartment complex on the left side whose system has failed. And they have a waiver now through the Board of Health because they know that sewer is coming down the street. So if the project doesn't move forward, they've got to do something.
But do we have a cost of just doing that small section? I mean, the objective here is to develop that property.
I don't believe there's been a cost analysis done on providing an individual line to that property. Again, I don't know honestly if that would be something that would trigger the removal of the grant, because there was everything that was spelled out in the grant indicated connections along the way, basically fronting critical needs areas and all of that. So that would be something, the language would have to be looked at to make sure that anything we did changing the original design from what was presented and how we got the design grant approved and the construction grant, we want to make sure that any changes to that, any modifications wouldn't give us a chance of actually losing that grant.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Bill.
I think to maybe Zach's question, instead of going to Main Street, going to Reservoir Street, because isn't there sewer down there at the crossing of Elm and Reservoir?
I'll take that. There is. We actually looked at that as one viable option. Unfortunately, the size of the sewer pumping station that is down off of Rumford Road cannot handle that much capacity. It was never designed for the additional flows. It was designed, however, to pick up a small portion of Reservoir Street, the newly paved section, and it was just something that didn't have a sewer main put down in the previous years. So we had looked at that, and in order to make that work and go that way, we would have to bypass that station and basically run a sewer main down Reservoir all the way down to the beginning, as close to Cobb Street as you can physically get, where our Cobb Street sewer pumping station is, the large station, and basically drop into the manhole before it goes into that facility. So the cost for that far exceeded the cost of running it this way, basically digging up a road where people already have sewer and already have water down Reservoir was going to be far more impactful than taking the route that we are now.
Okay. Last question, because I know it's always said, and I am somewhat skeptical. Has anyone ever done an appraisal that says Bill Rotundi's house with sewer is worth X? Bill Rotundi's house with septic is worth Y. I mean, we always say, oh, you put the sewer there, your value goes up. Is that proven? Because I'm not sure it is. Thank you.
That's a yes and no answer. So yes, there have studies been done on it. No, we cannot do it and come up with a single uniform number because each property is different. Each tie-in is different. The area that somebody may have a septic or even 2 septics on one piece of property, one that may have failed and been abandoned and one that may currently be in use and then have to be abandoned when they connect to sewer. That frees up all of that available space that now becomes buildable land, where before you couldn't put a garage, if you wanted to in your backyard, because that's where your septic and your leaching field was. So, it opens up other avenues that have value attached to them, and each property is unique in its own way, that it's very hard to assess what that number is. The biggest immediate cost savings that you could see would be the difference in the cost to connect to a sewer, whether you even had to pay a betterment and a contractor to connect, compared to what it would be if you walked out your door right now and stepped in a puddle, and unfortunately it was your septic system that failed. Now you're going to call a contractor tomorrow to avoid getting penalties and fines from the local board of health. You can't stay in your home. You have to go to a hotel or to a family member's house while that work is being done. And it's far more invasive to your property to have an entire septic system replaced than it is to have a trench dug from your foundation to the street. So we're in the $30,000 to $50,000 range, depending on the septic, depending on conditions of your property, and hopefully nobody built over your septic or over your lines, and now you have to deal with taking porches down, moving sheds, all of that other stuff that adds to the cost of having to replace that type of item that's typically forgotten about because it's underground.
But again, if I'm 100 feet off the street, we're getting pretty close to even. That's going to be a $40,000 trench.
If you dig it with mechanical means, it's going to get expensive. If you have it marked out and you have all your lines traced and you come in with a trenching piece of equipment like a ditch witch machine, you can run 1.5 inch line and you never even know it was there because the grass will be folded right back up down in the same trench the same day. Technology's come a long way.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Zach, go ahead.
And the other thing that nobody mentioned here is sewer is not free. I mean, has anybody lived in a house that's connected to sewer? I mean, I have. I mean, they charge you 1 time coming in and 2 times going out. You water your flowers, you're paying sewage. I'll give you an example. In my business in New Bedford, which I am a high water user, and they bill monthly in New Bedford. They've been not quarterly, they bill monthly. I average $1,000 a month for the water, $2,000 a month for the sewer. So sewer is very expensive, and in a 20-year, 30-year period, you could replace your septic system 4 times what you're going to pay for sewer. It is. Ask anybody that has it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Cody.
Frank, when I looked at this project for my own home and the cost of tying in, the tying cost, it's a private line that was run, so it's not a betterment. It's a connection fee, which from my house was $15,500, and then the cost estimate that I got at the time, which was 4 or 5 years ago, was like $10,000 or $12,000, and that was going to include a pump because it was the connection. It's 150 feet from my septic system to the road, basically. So exactly the scenario you're talking about, Bill. But when I looked at it, I wasn't going to exceed the minimum quarterly charge. And that's the case for a lot of users in town. I wasn't going to be tied into water, but I was going to be tied into sewer, and you can set your meter up so that it's on the other side of, so that you're not getting charged for filling your pool or watering your yard or whatever. So the meter's set up on that side, but it's like, is it $78 a quarter, or for some reason that number's in my head. It is like, there was no scenario where I was going to exceed that, and it wasn't anywhere near $1,000.
Correct. Yeah, in your situation, with having the line set up the way it is, if a house is on a well, we don't meter the whole house. So any of the faucets that go to the outside fixtures, any irrigation system that you have because you're on a private well is allowed. All of that water is not metered. Totally different where if you're on a municipal system, 100% of the water going through the home has to be metered, with the assumption that 90% of it is making it to the sewer. So unless somebody is spending a lot of time out there holding their handheld hose and watering their grass, for the most part, it is going to the sewer.
It's a quarterly charge, right? It's billed quarterly.
There is a minimum quarterly charge, correct, for both water and sewer.
And is it correct that most single family homes don't exceed that minimum? And if they do, it's not by much.
That one, John?
You'd be pretty surprised. I mean, I know my home, you definitely wouldn't exceed the minimum for sewer, but we see more and more single family residences using an astonishingly high amount of water that you wouldn't think so, but for it's a 12 unit minimum for sewer consumption, and then if you exceed the 12 units, it's 95% of your water consumption is what your sewer consumption is. So it's really, I know that sounds like a cop out, Cody, or I'm sorry, I'm assuming it was Cody who asked that. But it's totally different with every house.
And all of these houses right now are on well, right? There's no water line running down.
Oh no, there is
water. There is water there.
So this is an upgrade of the water line. So
This is an upgrade of the water line and the firefighting systems that would be out there. Right now, that system that there are 2 fire hydrants on that street where they should be, with current standards, every 500 feet or less. So there would be drastic upgrades to that. The size of the water main more than likely is going to remain as an 8-inch, which is a moderately sized water main, but because it's sandwiched between 2 12-inch water mains, we're going to have a significant amount of flow coming through there. And we could change that at the last possible minute and go up to a 10, increase volume if necessary, specifically if there was a request at this property to build something larger than what they're looking to do now. But even an 8-inch line would actually support a small fire pump if they needed to do something like that at that property, which is not being presented right now.
And so they're already on the meter, they're already paying water. It's not necessarily going to increase their water charges. It's just adding a sewer charge on the other side.
Correct.
Zach, you wanted to know someone who has water and sewer. I have water and sewer, 4 adults in my house, $560 a quarter for water and sewer.
Mine was 116, the bill I just got from Frank.
Oh, I'm in my MWRA, so I pay more.
Anyone else on this topic? So Mike, you'll talk to the Board of Health and Town Council, and we'll revisit this on Monday.
All right.
Very good. Do we
Thank
have
you,
anything
Ben.
else?
Nope.
All right, then the chair, well, any other discussion on anything? Okay, chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
You need a second, third, fourth?
All right, Kevin,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Sandy,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Paul,
Nice job, yes.
thank you. Cody,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll talk to
Right.
you Monday.
Have a good night.